Content over everything.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, Janice Atkinson can't be here today. She's at the airport. I don't think she's been detained. She's gone to America. So I'm going to have to read her speech out for you. Unfortunately, I don't have long locks of luscious blonde hair, and I couldn't find a wig on the way here to wear. So you just have to put up with me, unfortunately. But it goes as follows. Dear patriots and defenders of free speech, I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I'm in the US. Multiculturalism is destroying our societies. It seems to me that the liberal left politicians of Western Europe, together with Trudeau's Canada and the liberals in the US, want to wipe out our proud culture and Judeo-Christian heritage. But we are fighting back. With our new vocal and marching patriots, we are standing up for our beliefs to defend our countries. Multiculturalism has been a cancer festering away in closed communities aided and abetted by the state. Since Blair introduced hate crime and hate speech, the speed at which our views are being shut down is quite frightening. Last month, Lauren Southern, a Canadian and Commonwealth citizen, was detained at Calais and prevented from entering our country under Section 7 of the Terrorism Act. The policeman who spoke with her father said she has done nothing wrong, but she was still considered a terrorist. I offered Lauren safe haven in my hotel in Strasbourg and, ironically, in the European Parliament. So what was that?
That's what I bet you did, you know.
Not me personally, these are not my words. She's a very attractive woman, yes. Okay, this weekend, Abel Bodie and Martin Sauner, both EU citizens, were prevented from entering the UK because they were deemed far-right extremists. MEPs are supposed to represent the 500 million EU citizens, and therefore they are my constituents. Martin and I were in contact. His girlfriend Brittany Pettibone, who was banned from the UK, told me she was frightened for Martin's safety. Thankfully, the detention centre officers had the decency to keep him away from radical Islamists, their term. I have written to the Eustace Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, to complain at their treatment, but I do expect to apply from an over-promoted gender quota Remain voting Cameroon A-lister. While she's banning young people who are concerned about their futures and our continent from marauding migrants, her department is rounding up and deporting the British Windrush generation. Instead of rounding up the 35,000 scum on the terror watch list, or the 500 known returning ISIS fighters, or insisting that the EU closes its own borders and abandons Schengen, where the EU and UN's own figures show 500,000 jihadis have slipped in during the migration chaos, she's taken an unsound and easy option of targeting you. I read the question.
It's going downhill fast.
It is.
Bloody hell, we're all falling apart.
I read the questions posed to Abel Bodie by UKBA. They're exactly the same things we raise in the EU Parliament on a weekly basis. Will May and Rudd seek to lift our parliamentary immunity and have us arrested and deported too? Friends, we are in a battle of survival for our countries, our beliefs, our future generations. Do not give up the fight. Across Europe we are winning. From Brexit to Austria, Italy, Poland, Hungary to Trump, the silent majority is silent no more. Be brave, stand up and be counted. Say no to radical Islam, Sharia law, uncontrolled migration. Defend our right to free speech, the values of family life, and tell our governments that we want you to defend our rights, not the alien cultures and terrorists among us. We want you to shut down hate-preaching mosques and deport their hateful imams. We want you to say the 10 million migrants poised in the north of Africa that they cannot come here, whilst we say we want our brightest and best from around the world to work here. But we choose who they are, and that shall not be imposed upon us. Stand strong and we will win. Janice Atkinson, MEP. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Where is she?
She said she's in the airport, but I don't think she's actually been detained. I think she's just travelling. I don't know exactly where she is, to be honest. Any other questions? This man seemed very emotional.
Yeah, very emotional.
Come forward, tell us.
Well, no, I'm good here. You said get rid of the hate.
It's not my words, I'm reading someone's speech.
That's why this is all irrelevant. Yeah.
Is it? Well, you can still have an opinion, man.
It's meant to be Speaker's Corner, we're live debating shit. And you're going to
Ask me a question.
They're preventing them coming out.
Oh, well, we'll have you in a minute. Get a bit of excitement. Anyone got an actual question? You can ask the question about the speech. I'll comment.
Something about these, people that are doctors and that are Muslims. I'm seeing on the internet a lot of them have been suspended for sexually harassing the patients. So a lot of these so-called intellectuals aren't a benefit to the country anyway. That's
interesting. Well, I think we need to enforce the rule of, shall I say? Well, we need to have migration based on skills only, an Australian-style system where if someone has the skills we need, we're not worried about what they look like. They're the skills we need, we should welcome them in, rather than having this racist, white nationalist EU system where whites are given preference to come here and African and Asians can't. It should be by skills. But there should be a full enforcement of the rule of law. Our laws should be enforced, our culture is supreme. And if someone doesn't respect that, their visa should be removed, they should get out.
If a woman refuses to shake a hand in a citizenship ceremony, should she be allowed citizenship?
No. I think that shows that person is not ready to culturally integrate. People can come here and enjoy the financial benefits. They can come here and get work if they have skills we need, if they want to be part of our society. But if they hate our culture, if they hate our people, what are they doing here? They're only coming here for the benefits and not to put anything in.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you think, from your point of view, we should do about the elites?
In what sense? That's a broad question. You have to be a bit more specific.
Like, the elites, like, we're doing all this stuff. And what should we do to, stop them from doing all that stuff?
Can you shout? I can't hear you. Sorry, that man's noisy.
The elites, who are doing all the stuff you said.
Yes.
What do you think we should do about that?
Okay. I'm not going to call for any actual violence. But this banner here has the People's Charter written on it, who rose up about 189 years ago across the country to say that the people should have the vote, that the wealthy elite, the House of Lords, the landed gentry should not be lecturing us and ignoring our voice, that they should hear us out because people are starving, they didn't have food, they couldn't afford housing, there were serious problems back then. And by protesting on the street, even when they were shot up by the army, that's how we got the vote. And again today, we must stand up and protest and make a noise, not just here but throughout the whole country, until the politicians get scared that they won't get voted back in. Because they keep doing a farce, like Lucy Allen up in Telford's pretending to be interested in stopping the grooming gangs, but for about 10 years they've ignored it. So they just put on a show, but if we put real pressure on, they're going to have to listen to us. And then we can look to get in some serious politicians like Donald Trump or maybe Viktor Orban, I would say is an even better role model. I think these people are the kind of politicians we need to see rising in this country. I'll turn the camera around to this man.
I had a very disgusting news yesterday that some of the Saudis apparently, their money they got, and the sellouts that some of them, the government, our government, and our even media, they dare to say which Prophet Muhammad, which is across the line. That I would not take such an insult. I would not take such an insult. Don't you think somebody got to give a slap in the mouth of the newspaper? Shamelessly, they do such a stupid thing, actually calling our queen. Yeah, this is not Muhammad. She's not Barbara.
I need the camera. The thing is, where we're standing here in Speaker's Corner campaigning for free speech, it's very difficult for us to tell them not to print that. But I think probably Clarence House needs to demand these people give evidence to these claims, justify these claims.
Historians, and I bet those historians, if you look at their names, it would be Muhammad Ali, Abdul Aziz, whatever. I bet it is. Otherwise, how on earth, all these years, with the history, long history that we got, nobody came with such a thing. All of a sudden, in such a sort of, critical time, all of a sudden the historian comes, oh, hold on a minute, the Queen is the granddaughter of Prophet Muhammad. No, it's not. No, she's not.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to know what's really going on, I'm about to start my talk.
You're not allowed to use megaphones.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Should UKIP and For Britain come together?
Okay. I think this would be a very...
your view?
In my view, I think all of the parties that are leaning towards the right need to try and work together more. Because if they keep having more parties, we've got Johnny Seven's party, we've got Henry Waters' party, there's something called the Foundation Party, we've had Henry Bonking Bolton make his party, the one-member party. Because we didn't let him shag the youth wing. But we need basically all of these people to come together and stop having 5 billion different parties, because you'll come to an election and people won't know which of those to vote for. Some will vote for this, some for that, and the right-wing message will all just be split and divided. This is divide and conquer. I'm sure the left, or even possibly MI5, is encouraging this because it's going to stop us building any kind of populist movement. And whatever party someone has joined, UKIP, For Britain, Democrats and Veterans, we need to still work together to keep that voice strong. We should go to protest together. We should support each other's efforts, whether it's protesting, YouTube, whatever, to try and keep that voice strong, because I believe the establishment is intentionally trying to split us, and this needs to stop. Really, Gerard Batten, Johnny Sevens and Henry Waters need to sit down and work it out and work together.
There's one reason why there's so many parties, and it's because UKIP failed to address the fears and concerns of the people in the party. If you had one little concern about Islam, they expel you. That is why more and more parties have grown out of it.
Well, there are serious issues with the management of these parties, but some things are not being discussed. I myself am very concerned that I feel UKIP needs to speak out a lot more against political correctness and challenge that. It needs to attack stuff such as gender fluidity, the nonsense that there's millions of genders. It needs to attack stuff like the wage gap. It needs to be a party that stands up, especially for the white working man who's hated in this country. And it's not willing to do that at the moment, so I think that's going to hinder it going forward. It needs to be like Donald Trump and really speak out for the rundown people, the people in the north of this country, in the Midlands, in Wales, who have seen our jobs go off to China because they're just importing lots of cheap, crappy goods which people are buying to make money. And the people running these businesses don't care that where my family used to live in Wales, it's all collapsed and there's no community and no jobs and I can't live there, because they're all off in the Caribbean. Richard Branson's over there enjoying himself and all these other people sunning themselves on a beach, and they don't care if this country falls, if you've got no jobs, if we're being run over by Islamism. None of these problems are in their backyard. And I think UKIP needs to stand up and be the people's voice and a proper anti-establishment party and fight back if it wants to win. Yes?
You were talking about preserving our cultural identity.
Oh, yes.
And then you stated that leaving the EU would be a good thing, because then we can focus on workers from outside the EU rather than prioritising those within the EU. But surely the cultural issues that we face in the UK aren't coming from the EU, they're coming from outside the EU, because that's where the cultural issues are, in the Middle East and Africa.
Okay, well, there's two things I could say to that. The first thing is I wasn't calling for mass migration from Africa, Asia or the Middle East. I oppose mass migration entirely, and I want immigration to fall down to almost nothing, because we should be training up British people to do jobs rather than going on the dole. We have far too many people studying nonsense like feminist studies rather than studying something useful like engineering and science, and all these women upset they can't get a well-paid job and the wage gap myth. They should go and study science, and we wouldn't need so many people coming here instead of having people working at McDonald's and crying or on the dole. So we need to stop mass migration, and if mass migration stops, and migration's at a very slow rate, it doesn't really matter where the people come from, as long as they respect our laws. If they don't, they should have to leave. But if mass migration's at a low level, people can integrate slowly, they can get absorbed. If you go back 100 years ago, you might have had a school classroom of 100 English kids and one kid was from another country. They had a massive social peer pressure to integrate, and that happened. But these days you have a school where everyone's from another country in London, and they all speak another language at home, and they don't feel British at all, and they even spit on our flag. That's why we don't have integration. So I think if that changed, that would help. As for leaving the EU itself is insisting we have an open border. And the problem is the EU doesn't man its own southern border in the Mediterranean. It's letting in all of these fake refugees who are raping everyone, and then they're going to come up here and they're waiting at Calais and trying to come in. And not one of these people is a legal refugee. By UN definition, you're meant to stop at the first safe country. If you leave Somalia,
waiting for housing, 1.2 million people
yes.
waiting for social housing.
I just finished. I'll come back. If you leave Somalia and you're looking for the first safe country, that's not Britain. There's only countries on the way. You could go to Kenya next door, where they speak the Somali language, they have the Muslim religion, and they would rapidly integrate. There's no need for any of them to come here. They're all fake refugees, and it's the EU demanding we take them in because it's riddled with something called political correctness, which is the real reason we don't have a sensible migration system. It's the Kalergi plan. You can respond to me. You look really bored when I said that. That was just like... Which point did I get wrong?
I think that it's quite naive to think that replacing the population from around the world slowly will somehow change the situation and make it.
So did the migration of the French Huguenots, when they came here as refugees, just a few hundred, they wiped out our culture, didn't they?
Yeah, but we're not talking about the population.
Well, I am.
Yeah, but
That's the point. I want migration down to such a low level. Basically, we don't need any unskilled migration. We have people without a job in Britain on the dole who need those jobs, and they need to be encouraged to do those jobs. So the only migration we would have is 1 or 2 doctors and engineers who would come into our country. That's all we'd need to prop up the NHS. They're not going to take the country over.
Only 50 people are working out of millions. So if you think they're going to come here and work, sweet dream, my God.
I'm not sure if the strawberry farmers and the farmers across Norfolk would agree with you that we don't need any low-skilled migrants.
Whoa, there's plenty of people on the dole.
They're not. Unemployment's at an all-time low.
It's still about 8%, isn't it?
I don't think it's that 8%. But it is at an all-time low.
Or should I look it up?
And the numbers in employment are at an all-time high. I think, and you know, we've always, for decades, we've brought in Ukrainians to pick our fruit. I think that would still be a requirement.
Well,
I completely agree with you. We need to lower immigration.
Well, migration should be on a demand basis, so supply demand. So if someone can prevent a valid case to argue that they need those Lithuanians to come and help, then that could be. If they could say we have a natural shortage of people with fruit picking skills, or we have actually eradicated unemployment, then we would have an argument. The problem is we had a lot of people come in during the growth in our economy about 10 years ago. Then we had a crash with the recession, and now we don't need all of these people. So they should have been here, like Saudi Arabia does, on temporary working visas. Why can Saudi do that but we can't? Why do we have to give people passports so quick?
That's what we used to do. I think the Ukrainians used to come here on a specific type of visa for a set period of time to pick fruit in the summertime. So it's very easy to manage it.
Like this young lady could go to Australia for 1 year if she wants a temporary working visa, and then she would have to come back. So why are we doing the same with people who come here? Why can anyone from the EU just come here permanently? Why are they not on a year visa, and then we consider after a year, do we still need them? Anything else, or? Oh yes.
You said that the establishment is sort of like anti-right.
Anti-right? Yeah. I am right-wing.
Yeah, so the establishment is anti-right.
Yes. The establishment is a postmodernist, globalist, liberal elite enforcing the Kalergi plan, and it's all part of the round table.
Alright, what's the third map? What's that one?
Okay, the Kalergi is the guy called Enhover Kalergi, designed the EU flag. The blue banner with the white and yellow stars. He chose the anthem. He chose the anthem "Ode to Joy" by Beethoven, and he also said he wanted to merge all of Europe and North Africa as one country and make a new race. He actually said that.
That's a dream. That's quite nice, isn't it? Imagine a world with like no borders.
How's that going to work, mate?
As a dream, I said as a dream.
Why is that? It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Do you lock your house at night?
How is that a dream?
Are you saying it's a dream because it's not reality?
How is that a dream? Do you think that's ever a realistic thing that would be for the greater good?
I'd say if each individual respect the boundaries of each other individual.
Well,
then it
that's a
would
big if, isn't it?
It is a big if, but I said a
So
dream.
Do you
I said a
think,
dream.
let's ask a question. So do you think all of those Muslim people across North Africa and all the Christian people across Europe are just going to harmoniously mix overnight? I mean,
No way, not overnight. No way.
What
Not
would the new religion be?
well, imagine a world without religion.
Well, that's another nice big if, isn't it?
I think a few people here might not be agreeing with that.
Yeah, try and start off in Speaker's Corner. We'll see how you do, and then
I
we'll
think you should go and try that man
do
over
the
there.
rest of the world.
Go and
But,
tell
look,
him that.
but look, once we know, like, it's a nice dream, although it has massive flaws.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's
a nice dream, but it has massive
It's a beautiful
flaws.
dream, but it will never work in reality. That's the problem.
Exactly. So the question is, what should we do in reality? Yeah.
Well, in reality, as you said, this is a beautiful dream. I confess, when I was about 16, this idea of us all holding hands and being one big happy family it sounded wonderful. But then I grew up. I realised that people come here and they don't like our culture, and some of them want to kill us. And I also realised, looking at places like Northern Ireland, that if you don't have one homogenous culture, you have violence, because each cultural group feels that threat and the other runs the country and they fight for dominance. That's why we have a conflict in Northern Ireland. That's why we had the partition of India, because the Hindus and Muslims wouldn't get along. This happens again and again. So you need each culture to have its own country, its own government.
No, because so multiculturalism, from what I know, like you can look at London, you go, oh look at all these different cultures in London. They're not fighting each other though, are they?
Aren't they?
I put that a question at the end.
So terrorism isn't a real thing, is it?
Well, obviously, no. There is an element of terrorism that happens.
Okay, rest my case.
Mr. Jones, can I read?
Go there. I'm not really the boss here. I'm just on the step there.
Book of Quran.
It's a
And
window
what they
king,
think about you and how they're going to behead you and crucify you, right? That's what they're going to do. Can I read it for you? The answer is yes.
You'll have to ask
Right?
the.
Go ahead.
Can I read it
It's
for
a
you?
public
Given us
space.
permission.
Do you two have a chat?
No, I don't
don't
want to hear. I
mind.
don't want to hear.
You don't want to hear? No, I bet. That's why you asked.
Well, tell the camera. Tell the camera. What do you want to tell them? Tell the camera.
My friend, this is the common thing. Even in America say, but we are the generation of immigrants. Yeah, you morons. Your generation of immigrants came from Europe with the history, culture, civilization. But that was the First and Second War actually pushed some people actually go. Yeah, we didn't have from Arabia those people who come and love to come and basically push me to Islam or behead me or crucify me. And it's written in their peaceful book of Quran, yeah? With the evidence, I can read for you. I got 109 of them, yeah? So if you want to read them, your answer is there.
Read one verse to the camera. Maybe this dad doesn't want to hear, but the camera will
No,
hear
go
it.
on, read it if you want to read it.
Let me
No,
read
like
it
I'm the
for
king
you.
or some shit.
I will cause terror in the hearts of those who disbelieve. So strike them upon the neck and strike them from every fingertips. And that is from the Quran.
All right.
Yeah?
All right.
That's how they think about you, my friend.
Well, they don't.
They're not going to come and love you here. They're going to come and behead you.
It's
Some of them choose not to follow
Right?
that bit of the book.
Are you
But the
saying
book
that's
does.
not that he
And
made
that's
that up?
one of the 109.
Wherever you-
109.
We've already got
Yeah?
no. We've already got closer here. Everyone can
Alright.
keep up.
Am I lying?
Not all of them. Believe
Am
me,
I
that was my
lying?
thing back
You
then.
called me
No,
lying.
like you say, the book. That's what's in the book. I'm not a fan
It's
of
a
it.
From your
worry.
Quran.
Yeah,
Read
I'm
the
not a fan
Arabic
of it. I
one.
go around saying, yeah, let's get rid
Read
of religion.
it. Don't talk crap. Read it.
Some are worse than others,
Read-
aren't they?
You read it.
I can't read
You
it.
saying
someone
you call me
else
lying.
knows.
You
Yeah,
read
sure,
it. No,
yeah.
no, you
Tell
read
me, you are
it.
not lying there. You cannot even read it?
Flipping
If he can't read it, how does he know what the book says?
This is typical. Typical of
If he
you.
can't read, how does he know what the book says?
Yeah, you read it.
Have you read the Old Testament? Yes.
I just did.
The New Testament replaced the Old. The New Testament replaced the Old.
Here we go.
Christianity
That's
is
in your
not
Quran,
based
you
on
Muslim.
Mosaic
You know
law.
better than me.
I'm a Christian.
You don't.
That's up to you.
Because
That's
you're a
not my
moron.
religion.
Yeah, exactly.
You should have gone to Specsavers.
Live in a modern society. They have religion, but they don't use it word for word. That's how religion works.
Well, I think you've just walked in here, and I just. Young man, so I don't know your name. I'm trying to get attention. You've just walked up here. What I just said earlier is, I believe anyone should be allowed to come here if they respect our culture and our laws. So I'm not against Judaism.
Yeah, I won't say
I think the majority of Jewish people are very well integrated into our society.
What?
I said the majority of Jewish people I think integrate. Jewish people are not blowing up buildings. Jewish people are not killing people. We do not have radical Jews running grooming gangs. There's a big difference. Jewish people's religion has had a reformation and it's modernised and fitted into the Western world as has Christianity.
In the main.
Wahhabism has not.
Not completely. In the main.
Yeah.
Well,
there are a few exceptions to that.
I'm not going to join the religion.
No, I don't think we'd have you, to be honest.
As you're treating Muslims now?
No, that's not true.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, are you saying that I'm Hitler?
You are Arab. Treated in this country. They came before Hitler.
I'm not calling to gas people, am I?
I said they came before Hitler.
I'm calling for people not to be killed. I'm calling for people not to be murdered. I'm calling for children not to be raped in the street. And you try and say that I'm calling for a gas chamber.
Did I say that?
You did.
So
You clearly did.
When my grandparents first came here, they couldn't get a job.
You were trying to insinuate that I'm like a Nazi.
No, I'm saying that what they encountered when they came to Britain, not what they ran from. So when they came to Britain, they had cartoons in the Daily Mail, which are very similar to how Muslims are treated now. They couldn't get jobs anywhere because they were Jews. They could only have like the poorest.
Muslim people can get jobs in our country. Muslim people can get jobs in our country.
Yeah, but would you say
Muslim people in our government?
Yeah,
Muslim people in the government. So you say it's unfair for you to say the mayor of this actual city is a Muslim. So it's unfair for you to.
At what point?
No, wait. Let me finish. It's unfair for you to say that Muslims are persecuted and can't get a job or anything in this town, and they're being driven out because the actual mayor is a Muslim. So
I would contest that. I do not believe the mayor of this town is a Muslim. Number one, the whole idea of a mayor is just a load of nonsense. There's no such thing as a mayor. Don't be silly. He's just a bloke, right? Number two, there's no such thing as Islam. It's just a piece of programming. It's a digital piece of programming.
Is there any such thing as you?
In a digital, of course not. Right? It's just a virtual reality we're living in. It's all a load of rubbish. There's no such thing as Islam. There's no such thing as Muslim. It's just the whole belief, the whole idea that they've all agreed on something that they haven't all agreed on. Nonsense. There's no such thing as any of all that stuff. Rubbish.
None of us are real then. We're in a computer game.
Well, we are, yes.
This is Sims.
Seriously, have you ever taken magic mushrooms, sir?
I haven't. No,
you really should.
Have you?
Seriously, of course I have.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I have? Right? But
you
you
take some
should.
this morning,
You should
sir?
take some and then come out here. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Right, and when you've taken the mushrooms, you just realise that everything is just a digital piece of information. You're in this kind of multi-dimensional movie. So when you speak about them and this people and that group and Islam and Muslim, right? You're just keeping on being you're part of the problem to say they're not Muslim, they're just people. Everyone's just someone.
So is terrorism real?
Terrorism?
Yeah.
What is terrorism? How about you tell me what it is? Yeah. And what is it? What is it?
Terrorism is when you use violence to enforce a political idea.
Okay. What does that make the police?
The police are viewed as having a legitimate right to use
political
violence.
idea. Hold on, okay, what does that mean? Okay, use violence to forward a political idea. That's your definition of terrorism.
The police aren't pushing a political view. The police aren't using violence. Next question. Next question. Move along. Of course they're not. Of course they're not.
Hold on a second.
They're not.
Can I ask
Are you saying that that's what terrorism is, using violence to force a political view? Okay, if that's what it is.
Let me answer your question.
So then what? Yeah, go on.
Let me answer your question. Okay, the police are not necessarily forcing a political agenda. They are using force to protect the people, which is different. No, they're not meant to use
funny.
force.
Who will he phone when his house is burgled?
Oh,
who will he
really?
phone when his
what?
wife is raped?
Okay.
Who will you phone?
Nobody is calling
Ghostbusters? Who will you phone? Who will phone? You're a hypocrite. Who will you phone when your bike is stolen? Who will you phone? It won't be Ghostbusters, will it?
Okay.
There's a difference between the police using excessive
If you'd like me to
force.
answer the question,
Who will you phone when your wife is raped?
I'll tell you what
Let's
happened.
hope she isn't. But
Thank God my wife's never
Phone
been
the
raped.
local
But if she was, who would you phone?
However, let me tell you two incidents
phone ISIS.
that had happened to me in the last 10 years. 5 years ago,
They're
I
not
was
real
burgled.
anyway.
I was burgled
No, it
by
wasn't
someone
real.
who
It's
was
all
meant
in
to
your
be-
head. You said it's nothing
It
real.
isn't real. That's true.
He's
It's
making it
absolutely
up.
true. It's just a
You made it
story.
up, okay.
It's a story, but it's just but it is a story in this
Dimension.
virtual reality. It's a story that fits within the rules of this virtual reality game. Okay. So it
You
did
set the
happen.
rules to
It
this
did
game.
happen. What's that?
Have you set the rules to this game?
Which no, I haven't
you're
set
playing?
them. No, I haven't set
Who
the
set
rules.
them?
Who has?
The creator of the game.
So you
Who's
believe in
that?
God?
Not. I don't use the word God.
What do you use?
I don't use the word God.
What word
I
do
don't.
you
There,
use?
there,
The
if I had
devil.
to, hold on a second. Hold on a second. If I had to use a word, and that would need some serious delving into, I would say consciousness,
I think there's a few people
which is
that help you.
outside
Whose consciousness?
consciousness, which is
How is that
The mass
consciousness? This isn't real.
yeah, there is a kind of mass consciousness
Is there?
that's connected,
Is there?
and we're connected to each other through this
Can
mass
you explain your
consciousness.
shirt to
Yeah.
us?
Oh, I used to eat meat, and I regard now what I did as serial murder.
But it wasn't real.
Well, again, you're absolutely right.
So how did
on
you
some
kill it?
on some level, it wasn't real. However, you're not living. None of us are living at the level of realization that it's not real, and therefore, if I was to do
Except
that
for you.
to you,
Except for you.
not me as well, right? If I was to do that to you, yeah. You would, if I would start chopping your legs off or putting you,
That would be cannibalism,
putting you in an oven.
That would be
yeah?
cannibalism.
Yes,
That's
it would
slightly
be, Yes,
different.
you can call it what you like.
On the
yeah?
evolutionary
That's what
terms,
you're
that's
doing.
slightly different.
That's what you're doing to animals. If I was to do
Well,
that
they're not
to
the
you,
same species,
you
are
wouldn't
they?
come back and say, "Oh, that's all right. Oh, look, the next door neighbour's just a film."
Okay,
Fine.
we're going to have
because
another
the film,
speaker. Sorry.
part of the
We have
film.
our next speaker. Sorry.
Oh, your next
so,
speaker?
Are you ready?
Are you trying to make Britain great?
Yes.
Again.
Have you made Britain great again?
We're going to have
through
another
this
speaker.
speech?
So, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a speech from Magnus. What's your name? Magnus Nilsson.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Luke. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's encouraging,
Thank
you
you.
know.
Thank you. Can I put the recorder there? Yes, I can. So I'm being photographed. I'm probably world famous already. My name is Magnus Nielsen. I used to come down to Hyde Park on a regular basis during the 1970s and during the 1980s. I was part of the great movement that was involved with the problems that were set by the infamous Matthew Palmer, Matthew Roundel Palmer, who's now Councillor Matthew Palmer of the Royal Borough of Kensington-Chelsea. He's got all his problems sorting out with the grievances of the victims in Grenfell Tower. Anyway, that was in the 1980s, and time has moved on, and since then I have been a member of the UK Independence Party, and I've stood for Parliament on 3 occasions for the constituency of Hampstead and Kilburn. Didn't get in, and that's the reason why I'm here. Never mind, I like to think that I was formed part of that movement that eventually saw the referendum result 2 years ago, and as a result, quite unexpectedly, the majority population of this country decided they'd had enough of the European Union and decided they would come out.
Hey!
Hooray! Hooray! Hooray!
Hey!
The question, of course, is that there are dark forces in the that are working to have us draw us back into that abominable organisation, and who knows, they may succeed. But nevertheless, we'll all have to be resolute. But the fact is that we now, as a nation, have that opportunity to remove ourselves from the European Union, which is an organisation which is going to collapse anyway, and no doubt will collapse upon all its members. When it does collapse. Fortunately, we don't have to be part of that, and we have an opportunity to make ourselves great again. Now, I don't know very much about Luke's organisation. I've read his charter. I can't find anything to disagree in it. It doesn't say anything about setting up concentration camps or liquidating large sections of the population of this country. It's all full of the nice sort of fluffiness that you normally find in political manifestos, so I will always subscribe to nice fluffiness, whatever it may say. So that's really why I'm standing here. But my main concern is the fact that we have in this country elites, and we also have a problem from people among the Muslim population. I have to be very careful when I come down here to use my words very, very carefully. I'm not talking about all Muslims. And I'm not even talking about most Muslims. All I'm saying is that there are among the Muslim population enough to cause a nuisance. And the problem does not so much come from them, the problem comes from the ignorance of our elites, from the ignorance of those people who are set up in positions of authority. And to show you what I'm talking about, I have come down here with the judgment that was given on the 23rd of last month in relation to the prosecution and subsequent conviction of a man called Ahmad Hassan, the man who put a bomb on the underground at Parsons Green, left an explosive device on the underground, which fortunately didn't detonate. Well, at least it did, but it didn't cause sufficient injury, the injury that was intended. Anyway, what has happened is that he's gone down. He was put up on trial because we have trials in this country. We don't just don't have arbitrary justice. If somebody breaks our laws, they go for a trial. They go in front of a judge. And there's a case for the prosecution and there's a case for the defense. And the judge carefully considers between the two, and then he makes his decision. And what he says is, in my judgment, taking all these considerations and aggravating, mitigating factors which I've outlined, the appropriate minimum term is 34 years with no discount for time spent in custody. Okay, so it's going down for 34 years. While we're talking about this, can anyone sort of work out what the figure is? How much it costs to keep somebody in prison per year? How much it costs to keep somebody in prison for at least 34 years? I think the British state is being extremely generous. Once upon a time in this country we had capital punishment, but because we are a civilized nation, we got rid of that punishment many years ago, and we no longer have it. So Mr. Ahmad Hussain is going to be the guest of Her Majesty's prison. So, Ahmed Hassan,
25 years ago,
for offence of attempted murder, which you have been convicted, I sentence you to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years.
Magnus.
Finally, Ahmad Hussain, this is the judge speaking, this is Judge, the Honourable Mr. Justice Haddon Coe.
Sounds very queer to me.
And what he says is, finally, Mr. Ahmad Hassan, let me say this to you. You will have plenty of time to study the Quran in prison in the years to come. You will understand that the Quran is a book of peace and that Islam is a religion of peace. The Quran and Islam forbid anything extreme, including extremism in religion. Islam forbids breaking the law of the land where one is living or is a guest. Islam forbids terrorism. The Quran and the Sunnah provide that the crime of perpetrating terror to cause corruption in the land is one of the most severe crimes in Islam. So it is the law of the United Kingdom. You have therefore received the most severe of sentences under the law of this land. You have violated the Quran and Islam by your actions, as well as the law of all civilized people. It is to be hoped, therefore, that you come to realize this one day. Please go with the officers. Okay, that is the judgment of the court in relation to the judgment on Mr. Ahmad Hussain. Now, judging from the responses of some of you in the audience, I believe that some of you don't actually approve of the judge's, what we call obiter dicta. This is not part of the sentence, it's just the judge's offhand remarks to Islam. Now, the question is that the judge, by the way, I have written to the judge, I have written a 5-page letter pointing out to him the verses in the Quran which actually explicitly mandate violence on non-believers. And somebody in this meeting, has he gone off now? He had yes, that's always the way, isn't it? He had 109 verses which in the Quran which command pious Muslims, good Muslims, to go and commit atrocities against unbelievers. Now, my concern is not for the fact that we have this religious book, but that we have people in positions of authority who do not understand the true meaning of the Quran and what it commands their most devoted followers. And for the judge to say that you'll be improved by spending 34 years intently studying that book in the hope that you'll come out a better man is just incredible. I'm sure many of you in this meeting are much better informed about Islam than indeed the judges. But the judge, of course, is not alone. I mean, many judges have come out. That we had the chief judge in this country in 2010 come out and say that our laws have to be compromised with Sharia law. That is the most reckless and extraordinary thing that anybody in a position of authority can possibly say, that we should somehow compromise with a legal system that talks about stoning people and chopping off their hands for punishments, going back to all these barbaric punishments that come out of the deserts in the early Middle Ages. It's no place whatsoever in a civilized society.
Can you have 4 wives?
Yes. Sorry. You haven't read. Have you read any of the Quran? How much? Which parts? How much?
Allahu Akbar.
My question is, what parts were you referring to?
What parts am I referring to in the Quran?
We don't do it anymore.
I haven't brought a Quran with me. If I had, I would have. Let me just put it this way: I have sent the judge a copy of the Quran, and with that book I have taken a highlight, because judges are busy people. They can't go through the entire Quran reading it from cover to cover. So I have taken a highlighter and I have highlighted over 100 verses which command the believers to kill or subjugate unbelievers.
What does it say about
and those they have. The Quran actually has those verses, and one of them was read out to you. There are many, many others of a similar nature, demanding that the requirement upon all believers as part of the contract that they make with Allah to get into paradise and get their 72 virgins is that they go out and kill believers. Now, having said all this, please understand, I am not giving a broad brush condemnation of the entire Muslim population of this country, or indeed the entire Muslim population of the world. I'm sorry to keep on repeating this, but I do want to make it clear. I'm talking about a minority of a minority who actually believe what Muhammad actually taught. Yes.
But you are saying, I think you are saying that the whole of Islam, though, is a load of rubbish. Because it's based on a
I am saying that the whole. Thank you. I am saying that the whole of the Islamic doctrine is based on a number of fallacies. Again, if you read the Quran, you'll see that it talks about the sky being a canopy, the world being spread out flat like a bed or a carpet. Right? It talks about the sun rising in the east and setting in the west in a muddy puddle. Obvious nonsense, right? You have to understand, though, that there are people who take that seriously, because there are people who believe that that is the literal truth coming from God and is the truth, whatever Western science may say.
Do you have any affiliation with God?
Do I have any affiliation with God? Well, the gospel tells us we're all children of God, so therefore I must be a son of God. As indeed we are all children of God, so that's my affiliation with being with God. Incidentally, that's interesting, because that is a heresy in Islam. We can't think of ourselves as children of God, because it's implying that God has children and God has partners.
Is God a man
and
or a
therefore, that is the sort of, asserting that sort of thing is the sort of thing that's going to get your head cut off. But insofar, as I believe the Christian Gospels, which I don't necessarily all the time, I think that, even for atheists, I think that's a rather nice idea, don't you? That we are all children of God.
Yeah, that's what I believe.
We can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Yeah? I mean, it's basically it's a Christian concept, and it comes from the Christian gospel.
Magnus, can you tell us about?
But it's not found in the Quran. It's anathema to the Quran.
The previous speaker actually was against all getting around singing Kumbaya and Holy Hand.
So what?
He was against it.
So what? I'm an individual. He's an individual. He's an individual. I'm an individual. You're an individual. I don't have to be accountable for his ideas.
What's the yellow flag?
I've no idea.
In favour or against the...
Sorry, so what is the problem?
In favour, or am I in favour or against?
No, I'm asking, as a common sense suggestion, what would have been an alternative sentence for the person?
Is there an alternative sentence for as opposed to 34 years?
Yes, that the public have to pay for.
That the public have to pay for. I can't think of one at the moment. I suppose the alternative might be a length of rope. I am not a believer in capital punishment, so I don't think that should be applied. I'm saying this and I believe it, and I'm also aware that I'm being photographed, and this is going out on YouTube and could very well be used and brought up years in future about what I said at Speaker's Corner on the 22nd of April 2018. Can I just state that I don't think capital punishment is a good idea. Okay.
What would be a common sense suggestion?
I think the judge did very well in sending this man down for a minimum of 34 years. I'm afraid there's going to be a cost to the public. We have to deal with, we have to accept responsibility that this man was allowed to become...
What about his responsibility?
I'm talking about I'll talk about his responsibility, but then I'll talk about the fact that we have our own responsibility.
The justice system should be changed to amend so that these things are recognised, rather than the responsibility goes against the person.
Okay, so you want to know what are the alternatives, and can there be some alternative to this, so that we don't have to pay the enormous thousands, possibly millions of pounds, keeping this man in a hotel, effectively, somewhere out in the country, hopefully.
That's not a prison, that's not a punishment, is it?
Well, all I can say is that it's taking him out of society, and his man is clearly dangerous, and he has to be separated, right? But I don't think he has to be killed.
Wouldn't possibly better paid so that the justice system supports people that ill who want to do harm to the country and are then separated from the rest of the prison populace. Prison, it's got to be a punishment, not just.
It's got to be a punishment, yes. Well, first of all, it's got to protect the law-abiding members of the public. It has to be able to put these people away so they don't get the opportunity to do it again.
But if we're just doing the same old work, we're not actually getting
It's an issue, I know. The fact is that we're going to have to find some way of separating these people from society so they don't have an impact upon the rest of us who want to go around our lives, but why should they be supported and maintained by us? I agree entirely. We have to think of a way of doing that.
Went on about his faith or whatever.
He went on
I mean, whatever he's called.
I know Islam was not on trial at the Old Bailey, and the judge made a lot of remarks which were entirely misplaced and founded on the counsels of ignorance and deception. And it's unfortunate, but he's not alone. There are many people in senior positions, not only in the judiciary. Right, well, we have to educate our masters. We have to. That's what we have to do. We have to educate our masters. We have to tell them the truth about Islam. And I have done one thing in writing to that judge, and I have sent him number one, I've sent him a copy of the Quran, and I have taken a red highlighter to the offending verses.
Would that be,
Let me explain. That's what I've done. I have also sent him a copy of Ibn Ishaq's biography of the Prophet Muhammad. Right? And by the way, I would recommend you get this. Every one of you here. I don't have shares in this company, believe me, but I think it's very important that you should get this book. It's called The Life of the Apostle of Allah, Prophet of God. It's on Amazon. It cost me about £10. I don't begrudge sending £10, buying a book and sending it to a judge. And I took a red highlighter through the passages talking about the massacres and the murders that were committed not by Muhammad because he only murdered one person personally, but he instigated the murders of hundreds of people throughout the Arabian Peninsula during the period of his prophethood. He actually murdered more than 600 members of one tribe.
Have you ever thought of doing the same for the Old Testament?
But is that relevant
Question,
to
just a minute.
today
I've got
and also to
have
our
I?
life now?
Yes, I've got
Who's
this.
following
I've got
the
a
Old Testament?
question. I've got a
people,
serious
really?
question.
Have you ever thought about doing
Have
that
I
for the
ever
Old
thought
Testament?
about doing this about the Old Testament? Well, what point would that achieve?
Well, to show that these books are very complex.
To show that
they
these
can
books-
be used to justify both genocide and both peace at the same time. They're very complex and ambiguous and metaphorical. And to take them at their face value is
please.
folly.
I have read the books. You haven't.
Excuse me, I was raised devout Catholic. I'm no longer one. But I had to read the Bible.
So you haven't read the Quran?
I haven't read the Quran. I'm
No,
not
you haven't read
pretending
the
I have.
Quran.
But have you
You're talking.
just
I
because
mean,
I
with
haven't
great,
read.
Look, I don't want
this
to
is ad
insult
hominem.
you.
This is not an argument. You're not
It's not
engaging
an argument.
You're not engaging with my question. You're
Not
making it about
engaging
me.
with your question.
You're making it about me.
I'm starting to talk about the Quran, and I'm talking about the biography of Muhammad, right?
Okay.
The biography of Muhammad, which is like the biography of Attila the Hun or Alaric the Goth.
Have you read the Old Testament? It's the same sort of thing.
I have read the
It's
Old
the same
Testament
sort of
from
thing.
cover to
I'm
cover.
not saying it
There's a lot of unpleasant material in it, but it's not relevant to this subject.
Why is it not relevant?
Why is it not relevant? It's so easy to
Because
attack and divide
I
most
put the
Excuse
subject,
me,
it's
sorry.
not part of
Hold
the
on,
subject.
it's
I'm
very-
not doing a
You're
course
saying
in
but also.
comparative
You're saying
religion.
but
If you want a course in comparative religion,
You're
go to
attacking-
the City Lit.
You're attacking
This
Islam.
is Speaker's Corner.
You're attacking Islam.
I
That's
am
the subject.
talking
That's the subject.
about
That's the
Islam.
Okay, you're
right?
attacking Islam. Now I'm saying that to do
I'm
justice.
not attacking Islam. I am exposing Islam.
Right,
I'm
okay.
telling
Trying to
you
make
there are
Britain
very
a
nasty
greater place to
pieces
be.
of work in the Quran
My point was
which
about Islam
don't
as well.
do you any favours.
My point was about the Quran as well. Although I haven't read it in
You're
detail.
saying there's something also bad over
And
there.
I'm also
You're
saying
there's
that
also
in
something
order-
bad over there.
I'm
How's
trying to
that
engage with the
relevant?
speaker. I'm trying to
Okay.
ask
So it's
him
not a
something.
two-way
I'm
thing.
trying to ask
Yeah,
him
multiple
something.
ways.
I'm trying to ask him
Please.
something first.
In the name of democracy, be silent. You had a
I
question.
asked you, so my point wasn't about, I'm not trying to start a discussion of comparing different religions. My point is that it's very easy to attack one religion. It's very difficult to actually look at it as a complex text, as an ancient text, just in the same way you look at the Bible or the Torah or any of the old texts. You've got to see them as metaphorical, analogous, got very many layers to them, and if you just take them at face value, you're missing the whole
If only
point.
the entire world. would
You're
be-
missing the whole point.
Can I just take your point? Thank you very much.
It's very
This is-
complex.
No, I mean, this comes up all the time. It needs to be dealt with. I was talking about the Quran and I was talking
So
about
am I.
the biography of Muhammad. Now you want to switch the
You should get
ground
and talk about the Bible.
to something else. Okay, I'll do that, right, for you. First of all, the Old Testament is not written by Jehovah. It is written by numerous authors. It's supposed to be written by, parts of it are supposed to be written by Moses. It was certainly written by human hand. Maybe under the inspiration of God if you believe that sort of thing, but please listen. You asked me a question. Right? The Old Testament is not in itself a divine creation. And Jews don't even believe, and Jews and Christians don't believe it was a divine creation or that it was the word of God. Muslims or devout Muslims believe that the Quran was dictated by Muhammad through the agency of the angel Gabriel directly from Allah, and that every word in the Quran is the word of Allah, supposedly, and therefore cannot be changed. Right? Now this is where it becomes a problem, because Allah hates disbelief. And that's the difference between Allah and, if you like, between Jesus.
And the Old
because
Testament
Jesus-
God. Really?
Well, the Old Testament
Yahweh,
God's
that's
a bit of a nasty piece of
I
work.
don't-
But the Old Testament God developed, and the God that Jesus worshipped actually felt compassion for the sinner and went out to save them. It's a complete, what I'm saying is, it's a different God. Even if you don't, look, you may not believe in God. It's entirely, people come here are very difficult to have these arguments with atheists. Because you have a conception of God, the conception of Allah and the conception of Jehovah and the conception of our Father, as preached by Jesus of Nazareth, are different beings with different attributes. Allah is a God of hate, from beginning to end.
So is the Old Testament God in many ways. Not entirely, but in many ways.
There are certain aspects of the Old Testament God which are not favourable, but it's still a writing by fallible human beings.
I don't think Allah ever flooded the entire world. I don't think he ever sent pillars of fire down.
Well, according to the Quran, he sent the flood, and
I stand corrected. I didn't know that.
No, I'm sorry. Look, I'm not trying to be unpleasant. I'm just trying to point out that there is when this question always comes up. Why don't I start talking about the Old Testament? Partly because I haven't come here to do so, but since this question comes up all the time.
What did you come here to do? What did you come here
I
to
don't have a lot of fake time in religion generally. I think that all organised religion is highly fallible, but some of them are worse than others, and I think a lot of criminal activities take place under the pretext or under the disguise of religion.
What do you think of the Church of England?
What do I think? Not much.
Not much. You don't like
Not
it?
really. No, I'm not a member of the Church of England.
Okay, so you want to make Britain great again. A lot of British people would think you need
A
to
lot
make
of
the Church
British
of England
people?
great again.
No.
Yeah, I think
Not English people.
No,
English people. You are joking.
Okay, you live in London. You have a very metropolitan
I'm
idea
not
of-
from London. My mother goes to church every week. I know the entire congregation are over the age of 70.
Okay.
In
Yeah,
10, 20
so
years'
they-
time, there will be generally no English people going to church.
What do you think of those people then? That you make them out as a dying sort of breed of people.
Well, they are.
A lot of them.
A lot of the people who attend the Church of England do not subscribe to the nasty God depicted in the Old Testament. I think we can accept that.
In fact, a lot of them even doubt the existence of God.
And a lot of them doubt the existence of God, yes. Okay, so the Church of England is entirely irrelevant. I mean, it's like all these subjects in Speaker's Corner, you start on one line of attack and then somebody brings in something. It's like a thread on Facebook.
So making...
You start with an argument, 3 or 4 people wandering at the end, and you find yourself having to answer.
We're keeping on the focus. You want to make Britain great again. I don't know if that's your poster.
Well, I'm just standing up here because I like to exercise my lungs, and I'm an old man, and I just feel I need to get a bit of exercise before I eventually croak. So, literally, my voice is beginning to give out. Don't worry. I can go on for a little bit longer.
A better Britain is not necessarily a more Christian Britain for you. A lot of people who come here to Speaker's Corner in the last few weeks have said that that's what makes Britain great. Or one of the things that makes it great. It's a Christian country.
I did say I don't like organised religion. That doesn't mean to say, by the way, that I have any that I don't have some respect for the Christian religion. But I mean, I go back into the fact. I mean, I have to accept, as a student of British history, that the institutions of this country and the laws of this country are founded in the Christian gospel, in the ideas of the Christian gospel. And I've just talked about this idea of being children of God, right? And that's from the Gospel of St. John, that we are all children of God. And we also have, according to the Christian gospel, we all have a responsibility as individuals, right, to live our lives according to the eventual judgment of God, which is good. What do
you think of those other? You mentioned other institutions, so the army, the intelligence services, the monarchy. What do you think of all those other institutions?
All the institutions of this country are rooted in the coronation oath. That is the oath which is given, made by the Queen at the time of her coronation. She agrees to obey the laws of the land as they are set out. So she's not above the law of the land. She has to obey the laws of the land of this. She is required to exercise judgment with mercy, right? And she's also required to maintain the profession of the Christian gospel. That means regarding people as children of God rather than as slaves of God, which is the Muslim point of view.
Charles has said that he's going to be a defender of the faiths.
Charles has said he's going to be a defender of faiths.
That's what he
says.
Yeah, well,
he's a pillar.
And he talks to France.
Sorry,
should we be taking him
So he should be a defender of the faith.
I think it's very unwise for him to start mucking around this time and inviting other religions, because when this it's a good question. Thank you. I really appreciate your contribution.
It's a genuine question. I'm not trying to catch you
up.
I'm very
and
curious.
that's I understand.
I haven't seen you guys ever here speak before.
That's all right. Look, you've asked me this question. What about Charles and what's going to happen at the coronation when we get all these sort of weird and wonderful people? We get the Archdruid of Neasden. We get the Scientologists. Everybody with some religion or other claiming they want to be represented. Then, of course, we're going to get the atheists coming and say, well, why don't we have a point in this? Why don't we have a share in this? I think it's going to be an absolute bloody fiasco, and I hope he changes his mind.
So, another institution that Winston Churchill said was a pillar of the establishment was the trade unions back in the 60s, before Thatcher's sort of, I guess you could say, regime. What do you think of them? Do you think they deserve to have more respect in British society?
What?
The trade unions, yeah.
What about? Well, I
do you
mean,
think they deserve more respect as part of a renewed
respect
Britain?
From whom?
From just the British public, just from the British government.
What sort of respect do you mean? I mean,
well, for one thing,
they
to have encouragement, to have not just giving them.
To stop if you want to join a trade union. You're free to join a trade union.
You have freedom of association, of course.
You have freedom of association.
But there's no active promotion of that kind of association.
Is that for the state?
There should be, because
why?
Because it promotes associational freedom, the ability to secure your interests as a class together.
It's one way of doing it. It's not the only way.
It's one of the best ways. I think it's one of the tried and tested ways. Now, it has been under attack by Thatcher, but that doesn't mean
she's not been prime minister.
Well, like all these things, the trade
Tony Blair also
unions.
attacked
I
them
can
as well.
remember those times, and I mean, I remember living through these 70s and the 80s. The unions, like all these things, it's rather like the monasteries of medieval England. They're all very sacred institutions. They just became very, very, very powerful, and like all powerful organisations, they started to abuse their power, and they had to be. They had to have that power curtailed, and I think Margaret Thatcher basically did a good job. But I'm not going to stop people joining trade unions if they think they are.
Something a bit more controversial then. What about the NHS? That's something as well a lot of British people really value. They value it even more than the BBC, and I believe they value it even more than the monarchy.
BBC.
I could be
Well,
wrong.
that's not saying much for the BBC. I don't have a lot of
NHS, we've got into trillions of debt.
But the question is, we all need medical attention at some time, but there's also a responsibility upon us as citizens to take care of ourselves and to lead healthy lives. By the way, I'm going to set out an advert for Weight Watchers. I am now 95 kilos, and I was 100 kilos in the beginning of January, and I've done that through intelligent eating,
do it before and after
sensitive eating. So I've still got a way to go. I've still got a bit of a midriff, but I'm quite confident that's going to go within the next 3 months.
That's via Weight Watchers.
Weight Watchers, yes, and do a lot of walking. I walked all the way from Swiss Cottage
South Africa.
on foot to get here in order to keep my body exercised. You know, I'm 68 years old.
You know.
I'm 68 years old. We don't walk enough. We need to walk around and keep ourselves exercised. We're not physically equipped to go around in cars or even on bicycles. We should do some more walking because fundamentally we are all Mesolithic hunters. That is the way we are structured. That's the architecture of our bodies. And we eat raw meat. And we swing from the trees.
So should we go back to eating raw meat and swing from the trees?
Yeah, that's our
not
manifesto.
necessarily, but I'm just saying we need more physical exercise. We've got a lot of natural physical exercise. You had to run.
A lot of people in San Francisco would say we do need to eat more raw meat. And they don't.
We need more exercise. We have not attained a state of development beyond our Mesolithic ancestors. We need to run around. You're okay being the age you are, but wait for another 20 years.
I'm aware of it already.
You start thinking now, and it'll come upon.
I hide it very well, but it's not.
Well,
yes, you're right.
It's
a little bit of a punch there.
It's puppy fat.
What do you think of? You're from South Africa, and you seem very drawn in by communist ideals which you'll be promoting. What would you think of Julius Malima's call to kill all white people?
I don't think you should kill all white people. I don't think you should target any kind of race and kill them on those grounds.
Communism.
I'm not a communist. I'm a communalist. We can go into that and talk about that. I'm going to go and speak about that later. But to say, I think it's an interesting thing that Britain is right now supporting apartheid. Right now, I'm not talking about Thatcher supporting the South African apartheid. Britain is supporting an Israeli apartheid right now. It's an apartheid state. They even call it the apartheid wall. And if you want to make Britain great again, you're going to target the way Britain supports radical Islam in the form of Saudi Arabia, and you're going to tackle it Israeli apartheid. If you're very serious about not making Britain great at home, but making it great over around the world.
There's actually personally very little that I can do to affect what's happening.
Yes, you can, because you live in Britain. I'm assuming you're a British citizen. You can vote in and out governments.
Subject, right? I have stood for Parliament on 3 occasions.
On what platform?
UK Independence Party.
Well, you kind of served your purpose now, haven't you?
Well, I have,
yes.
Around? I mean, the fact is, I was laughed, I was ridiculed, I was spat upon, and in the end, my party eventually achieved its objective, and it would not have achieved that objective, I might say, had the UK Independence Party not been in existence, and if you didn't have people who are willing to put themselves up as candidates and be willing to be ridiculed and abused and spat upon.
How accurate was Nigel Farage about his plan to give that much money to the NHS on the side of that bus?
What about?
I can't remember exactly how much. Maybe this gentleman can tell me.
Right, that bus, they never said it's definitely going to be spent on NHS. They said if we leave the EU, it could be. No one said
absolutely
definitely.
said that. They
They're not the
absolutely
government.
said
They
that.
weren't the government.
So
They're
the left
not
just
in the
complete.
government.
They just spread lies and lies and lies all the time.
That was a genuine question. Again, I'm not trying to.
1,353 steps since I got up this morning. And the more walk, strictly speaking, it should be 10,000 a day. I know. I should be walking around. I should be doing this in a peripatetic manner and getting the rest of you to walk around.
Can I ask, do you think Nigel Farage's statement that Anne-Marie Waters and her fan base are all racists and Nazis? What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether he actually said that in so many words. I know Anne-Marie Waters personally. I don't believe that she is a racist in the common terms of somebody who actually believes in the supremacy of one race over another. I don't think that is
rubbish.
true.
That is rubbish.
And in fact, it is
utter
not
rubbish.
But the problem with this word racism is that it just becomes, it's overused. It's been used to a point where it just becomes common abuse. It no longer means anything that's of any value. And when you overuse a word, it has no currency. Try and go and get yourselves a thesaurus and find a number of synonyms and see what other words you could use, and you might exercise your mind to think of a word that might be more apposite. I teach English. I do this as a part-time. I do teach English as a part-time job. My semi-full-time job. I'm retired at the moment, but I take foreign visitors out to places like Stonehenge and Bath and so forth, and to Salisbury Cathedral. I was supposed to have a job this morning, but it fell through at the last moment, so that's why I'm here. Came here to support my very good friend Luke, who's a fine, decent, upstanding young man, despite being, or because he happens to be...
Despite being Welsh, I think you're going to say.
We won't hold that against him.
What was the despite going to be?
Believe everything. I believe I would absolutely trust him with absolutely everything. Make Britain great again. Make Britain great again. It's not a bad slogan. It seems to have some association with Donald Trump for some reason I can't possibly understand. Nevertheless, I don't see why Donald Trump shouldn't be President of the United States. I'm glad that the Americans have a constitution. They've come to the result of their constitution is that they have produced Donald Trump as a president. It seems so sad. There are so many other people in the running who would be a lot better than either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, but that's the way it goes. The president of the United States is circumscribed by American law. There are certain things which he simply can't do because the Constitution forbids it. That's the whole point of having a constitution.
Does UKIP have a stance on Britain having a constitution?
At the moment, I don't know. I wouldn't say I was thrown out of UKIP, but I had my membership of UKIP was withdrawn after I made some comments about the religion of peace, which they didn't like. So my response to that was, okay, well, they may have thrown me out. That doesn't mean I can't go on supporting UKIP. So that's what I do. I give them money from time to time. I support their candidates from time to time.
You don't need another one.
You do.
Already got.
He complained about being spat upon and shouted at when he was a UKIP candidate. That's because you associated yourself with a party that went around giving concussive comas to their fellow party members and saying things like bongo, bongo line. You might have had a chance if you joined a better party, man. I'm telling you. Don't blame it on...
I can't join another party. What other party? Other parties are committed to membership of the European Union.
What a joke, man. Start a new party.
What's the point?
You don't just choose a party because like clothes in a wardrobe. You choose it out of your political commitment. I am committed to having Britain withdraw from the European Union and join.
What's the point of UKIP now?
What is the point?
We haven't left
I've
the
got
EU
to come
yet.
down. I'm being
once and if we've left the EU, there may be no purpose for UKIP. But we're a long way off leaving at the moment.
The government won't
this is what happens when you're 60.
Who knows? Who knows? Whether we will or how we will.
How we will.
I wouldn't
Those
put a
of you
huge
who've
amount of
been
money
listening
on
to me,
it,
thank you very much for doing so.
Why are you calling?
Come take over everything from your belly. Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC.
Man, don't listen to.
You know what? Take yourself. Yeah. As you say, speak to them on the side. None of this. This is Real Housewives of Speakers Corner. Because this is Real Housewives of Speakers Corner right now. You men are just fighting each other. Just sit down.
You can't just say, come on, man, let us speak, bro. It's important, bro. Come on.
He's spoken to me for 10 minutes, man.
Come on, let us speak, man.
He said he wants to speak to him on the side. He wants to speak to him on the side. So show him some respect.
I know him. This guy.